Okay, we should be live. That people are going to be arriving. I really don't know if I have to accept people. Let's take a few seconds, see how it works. Yeah, no, just people just show up actually, so they will join us. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Valerie Orsoni, and I am thrilled to welcome you to The Long Game. Actually, Dr. Bryan was asking me, is that new? And yeah, actually, it's my brand new webinar series where we dive deep into the science, and strategies that truly move the needle on longevity, performance, and optimal health. And what a better way, right, to kick off this series than by addressing one of the most misunderstood, and you'll tell me, Nathan, if I'm wrong, but yet critical aspects of health optimization, detoxification at the cellular and the brain level. And we were talking with Nathan before we started it, but very often when we talk about detoxification, people think, juice cleanses, liver flushes, expensive supplement protocols, and miraculous pill. But there's one thing we rarely discuss is how your body can't detoxify what it can't reach. And that's exactly, and I'm talking under the umbrella of Nathan here, will fix it if I say something wrong, but that's exactly where nitric oxide comes in, right? So without adequate nitric oxide, our detoxification pathways are like a highway with no off ramp. And Nathan Bryan will tell us about that, right? And that's why I'm absolutely honored today to have Dr. Nathan Bryan with us. Before he can talk, he's a very simple person, but he's one of the world's leading experts, yes, on nitric oxide biochemistry. And what I like about you is I've met a lot of experts around the world, but you are super simple. You're down to earth. And I feel smart. You are going to feel smart when he explains to you nitric oxide. So you are not just someone who explains the science, but you have a gift for making it accessible, practical, and I must say, fun. So that's why I'm so happy to have you today with us.
Well, thank you, Valerie. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And yeah, look, we have to keep it simple, but this is an evolution. It's been a process because I spent 20 years in academia teaching in medical school and writing scientific papers, and then quickly realized that the lay people, number one, don't read scientific papers. So we have to figure out how do we take a complex science and distill it down into something that's useful and immediately applicable to the average person. So thank you for that. So that's a great compliment. So thank you.
And then what would you say? Oh, by the way, if you have questions, don't hesitate to click. There's a Q&A section. You can ask your questions. How would you define nitric oxide in a few words for people who have no clue? Is that a vitamin? Is it a protein? Is it a chemical compound? Do we make it ourselves? Where does it come from?
Yeah, it's a naturally produced molecule. In fact, it's a gas. And once it's produced inside the body, it's gone in less than a second. So, the challenge, going back 30 years, 25, 30 years when I started in the field, was when nitric oxide's produced, where does it go? What does it become? And how does it signal? Because this gas that's produced is only around for about 2 milliseconds or 1/5 of a second. So how does it do all that it does? But today we know it's a signaling molecule. It's how cells in the body communicate with one another. So it dilates the blood vessels to improve tissue oxygenation. It mobilizes our own stem cells so we can repair and replace dysfunctional cells. It regulates oxygen delivery into the mitochondria inside the cell. It activates the mitochondrial biogenesis, so we have increased numbers of mitochondria per cell. So now we become more efficient at oxygen utilization, and we don't get a lot of the toxic buildup. And then it prevents the ends of our telomeres from getting shorter. So we know that longer telomeres, longer lifespan, shorter telomeres, shorter lifespan. So everything with nitric oxide is a foundational molecule for health, wellness, and human optimization.
Would you say that, by the way, this is very clear, thank you. And by the way, I feel super smart when you say that. And then if I turn around, I'm trying to summarize with the same words. It's not as powerful. But would you say that without nitric oxide, we cannot live?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, you can see this and we've done this in animal studies where you knock out the enzyme that makes nitric oxide. They rapidly develop chronic disease. And now we're finding certain really rare diseases in humans that lead to chronic nitric oxide deficiency, and you see the clinical manifestations of that. But
How do you measure it, by the way?
well, that's been the challenge in clinical medicine is it's not a lab or it's not blood you can draw and then get a number like vitamin D and then treat that number. Because as I mentioned, it's produced, it's a gas, then it's
And
gone in
it
less than
stays
a
for
second.
so little. How do you know, right?
Yeah, so we rely on these metabolites of nitric oxide, and we can measure it in blood and saliva and cerebrospinal fluid and urine, and get a what we call a kind of a metabolic fingerprint of nitric oxide biology. But
So
unfortunately, it's only used.
can anyone get this particular test?
No, unfortunately, it's only used in the research environment. It's not, these tests aren't available clinically. But here's what we do. There are functional devices, medical devices that measure endothelial function or the function of the enzyme that produces nitric oxide in the lining of the blood vessels. And those are very useful and they are used clinically. It's called flow
Okay.
mediated dilatation or venous occlusion plethysmography, big words for endothelial function or dysfunction. But really, what we do is we rely on symptoms because today we recognize there's a hierarchy of symptoms that develop as your body gradually loses its ability to produce nitric oxide.
So what would the first symptom be? I mean, sometimes it's very generic, like fatigue or whatever. Is that something so generic as well?
Now, really, the first sign and symptom is erectile dysfunction or sexual dysfunction.
I was gonna say I don't have erectile dysfunction personally.
Well, I can proudly say that I don't either, because I think we focus on living a good, healthy, clean life and maintaining optimal nitric oxide production and regulation of blood flow. But when you think about this, and 50% of the men over the age of 40 self-report erectile dysfunction. And unfortunately, the women have been left out of the conversation, but this isn't just a male disorder. Because in order to get an erection, either in men or women, we have to dilate the blood vessels of the sex organs. And that dilation comes from the production of nitric oxide. So if your blood vessels can't make nitric oxide, you can't dilate the blood vessels, and men, you don't get engorgement, and then women become anorgasmic. Because
So
for
hold on a minute. Can we replace Viagra with nitric oxide?
Yeah, of course you can, because drugs like Viagra are dependent upon nitric oxide production. And we know these drugs were approved in 1998, and only 50% of the men that are prescribed Viagra or these other PD5 inhibitors respond with better erections. So these
Hmm.
drugs only work in 50% of the men. And the reason they don't work is those men that don't respond to Viagra, their body is not producing any nitric oxide. Because once
Wow.
you understand how these drugs work, so nitric oxide activates a second messenger called cyclic GNP, and then that's what leads to smooth muscle relaxation. And the phosphodiesterase inhibitors, the drugs like Viagra, prevent the breakdown of the second messenger. But without nitric oxide, there is no second messenger. And these drugs don't work. In fact, they can't work. And that's their mechanism of action. So, that told us 20 years ago that erectile dysfunction is a symptom of nitric oxide deficiency. And when you start to address it as a symptom of nitric oxide deficiency, now you can employ these strategies to restore nitric oxide production naturally and then stop doing the things that lead to the natural production. And that's the
Okay, I
solution.
have the title of our next webinar. It's going to be about how to get an erection more easily. I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot of men joining us.
That's right. Get ready
Um,
to be bombarded.
I know. But just going back to the detoxification crisis, because, we live in the most toxic era in human history. I mean, I think the number is like 90 or 92% of the products we find in a supermarket right now did not exist 100 years ago, something like this. I mean, we are exposed to thousands of chemicals, and thousand is maybe a small number, maybe tens of thousands of new chemicals a day. And I'm not saying this to scare people, right? Because if you're watching this, you are already in that world of longevity, so you know. But the reality is, air pollution, microplastics, heavy metals, pesticides, industrial chemicals in our water supply, off gassing from furniture and building material. The list is, I mean, staggering, right? And
Yeah.
we also have the dietary toxin, like pesticides, mold, mycotoxins. We talked about that together. Advanced glycation, so many issues. And our body is not able to keep up with all these external toxins, right? So would you say that, and that's why I was mentioning brain fog, because when people feel sluggish, brain foggy or chronically inflamed, usually they turn to detox protocols. And this is where things go wrong because, as I said earlier, detox approaches, the basic ones, are like same basic playbook, harsh cleanses, extreme fasting, aggressive binders, liver flushes, colonics, and whatever. But I think we are forgetting that sometimes you can do all of that, but if you are missing one of the main component like nitric oxide, this won't work. What do you think about that?
Like you're exactly right. Because there's different types of toxins. There's heavy metals, there's fat soluble toxins, there's water soluble toxins. But the first thing we have to do is we have to get good circulation because, it's like our cardiovascular system's like a highway. If we order something from Amazon and we order it, we get confirmation that it's ordered, it's on board, but there's a traffic jam on, the 105 or the 405 in LA, then it's not going to be delivered, right? And it's the same thing. So if we're exchanging something and they're going to come pick it up and take it back, if they can't get there, then it's without effect. And so that's how detoxification works. Number one, we got to remove ourselves from the source of exposure and limit the exposure to toxins. But then we've got to mobilize it and get it out of the system. And
Yeah,
our
it has
primary
to go in
detox,
the blood flow and then it be excreted.
that's right. And our primary routes of excretion are urination, defecation, breathing, and sweating. So if we're not fully hydrated and making a lot of urine, if we're not having regular bowel movements, if we're not practicing deep breathing, and we're not sweating, we get this accumulative effect of toxin buildup. And then that's when people start to get sick. So, and then, it's very difficult because you mentioned we live in a toxic world and it seems like we're constantly bombarded. But as long as we can deal with the toxins and detoxify and excrete them from the body, then we become pretty resilient to the onset of disease. But it's when we don't practice these things and toxins build up, start to interfere with biochemical systems and enzymes, then people get sick and they live really a horrible life and live with chronic disease.
Yeah, and the first time I met with you, Nathan, I remember I was a newbie when it comes to nitric oxide, and I was telling Dr. Bryan before that the first time I was exposed to nitric oxide is because I'm a scuba diver. I've done about 300 dives, and next month I'm spending the month in Papua diving. And one day I met an expert in scuba diving who said, "Oh my God, you must have a ton of nitric oxide in your body." And I'm like, "Oh, why?" I learned by accident that scuba diving generates a ton of nitric oxide. And so maybe that's why I'm not so, toxic or whatever. But from what I learned is that the fact that the detoxification is energetically super expensive, that our liver alone uses massive amounts of ATP to transform toxins into water-soluble compound that can be excreted. If our mitochondria is struggling, the detox pathway is slow to crawl, if I understand what you said correctly. And for our mitochondria to function optimally, we need oxygen delivery, which requires nitric oxide, correct?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And that's the thing, I think every time I look at detoxification, whether it's about having an adequate blood flow, sufficient cellular energy, or just to open the drainage pathways, the common denominator is nitric oxide, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And we call it a foundational molecule. Now, and I think, we discussed this. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a magic pill. It's not an end all be all cure all.
It's not the magic pill?
No, it's not
Oh, come
that pill
on.
doesn't exist, but it's foundational. Here's what we know. Your body cannot and will not heal or perform optimally without adequate nitric oxide production. So if you're involved in detoxification pathways and you're healthy and don't want to get sick, or you're sick and want to get healthy, and I tell people all the time, first focus on nitric oxide, because if you try to do all these other things without optimizing your nitric oxide production, it's not going to be effective because we have to get the good stuff in, the oxygen, we got to prime our mitochondria, and then we've got to take out the trash. And you can't do that with poor circulation or a compromised cardiovascular system. And that's what nitric oxide does. Opens up the blood vessels, improves tissue oxygenation, improves mitochondrial function, improves glucose uptake, oxygen delivery. Again, everything we know
So
about biochemistry and
it's a
metabolic.
virtuous circle, right? Once you get enough.
Indeed. Indeed.
Okay, because you're so positive. I was thinking in a negative way, like the vicious circle where if you don't have enough nitric oxide, which you said over 40, we usually lose about 50% of our ability to produce nitric oxide, which is a huge number, right?
Yeah.
And if you add to this stress and chronic stress, poor diet, lack of exercise, all these, modern lifestyle factors, if I understood what you said correctly, the blood vessels stay constricted, the tissues become starved for oxygen, which I think is called hypoxia.
Hypoxia.
Yeah, and then the cellular metabolism slows down, the waste products accumulate, and the inflammation increases, which to me is this completely crazy vicious circle. And if you have enough NO, nitric oxide, you get out of this vicious circle and you can detox yourself and then attack what I call, I mean, not me, but inflammaging, which is usually
Mhm.
called caused by all this toxic waste accumulation, correct?
Absolutely. And I'm excited about it because, we understand what leads to loss of nitric oxide production and we know how to restore it. And so, this may sound like bad news because it's complex biochemistry, but the good news, and I think the good news we want to share tonight is there's a solution that we know how to naturally restore the production of nitric oxide, of product
Okay, so
technology
how do
that
we
does
do
it.
that?
Well, look, in order before we could answer those questions, number one, we had to figure out how does the human body make nitric oxide? Because if you don't know the enzymatic systems and the biochemistry of how the human body makes it, then you can't fix it. You have no idea. And that's the problem with a lot of these companies out there selling so-called nitric oxide products. They have no idea what they're doing. They don't know how the human body makes nitric oxide. They don't know what leads to loss of its natural production. So how in the hell are they providing products to fix a problem they don't even have an understanding of?
It's called
So
marketing.
no, it's marketing. It's creative marketing, and actually, I call it deceptive marketing, and in many
So
cases,
how would you
fraudulent
say,
fraudulent
yeah.
marketing.
So if you were to tell someone in easy words how we can increase our nitric oxide production, first in a natural way and then in a supported way using, NO1, N101 products or anything like that, how would you say the first natural step could be?
Well, the first objective of medicine should be to optimize the body, give the body what it needs, let the body do its job. So now that we understand how the human body makes nitric oxide, the first thing we have to do is stop doing the things that interfere with the natural production. And so there's two primary pathways. There's an enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels, and then there's the bacteria that live in the gastrointestinal tract. And the ones we focused on are on the dorsal part of the tongue and the oral cavity. So if we focus on the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels, things like a high sugar diet, a simple carbohydrate diet, anything that you eat that leads to an increase in blood sugar completely shuts down nitric oxide production.
So would a keto
That's
diet be better or it's too intense as well?
No, I think more of a ketogenic diet, and everybody's different, right? Everybody processes sugar and carbohydrates
Yeah.
differently, and I think these continuous glucose monitors are readily available, and I encourage people to use them
I
because
have one right now. I'm trying a new one.
yeah. So and you know what you may be able to eat, because look, you're metabolically active, we're physically fit, we're physically active, so we make burn carbs more efficiently, so that a high carb diet may not lead to a glucose spike or an insulin spike. And then other people have some either moderate or severe insulin resistance. They may eat just a tablespoon of rice and see a huge increase in blood sugar. But that's why you have to know, because if your blood sugar increases, that sugar sticks to everything. It sticks to hemoglobin, it sticks to other enzymes, and it prevents their function. It compromises their function. So that's why sugar's the enemy, sugar's the
So
toxin.
we start with like less sugar, more like a high protein, high fat, or actually at least low carb or very low carb diet that would already stop the depletion or the slowdown of nitric oxide
That's
production.
right. That's right.
And then sleep, I guess sleep is huge, right?
No, sleep. There is no substitute for sleep. I mean, you have to have good sleep. But let me go back because we just talked about sugar. The other thing, and what we're finding is there's drug therapy like proton pump inhibitors, antacids, completely shut down the body's ability to produce nitric oxide.
Oh, I
So
did a
if you,
video not long ago on this. In Europe, they prescribe all these I call them the prazols, the omeprazols
that's
and the
right,
like, for
pantoprazole.
years, 5, 10, 15 years. And it shuts down nitric oxide, but also calcium metabolization, a lot of other problems that people have no clue about. So I'm so happy you're mentioning it. These medications should never be taken, but if you have to take it, it's a very short term, right?
Yeah,
Never.
that's exactly right. Yeah, they were never approved to be taken longer than 5 to 7 days.
Yeah,
But as you
exactly.
mentioned, these drugs, some people have been on these drugs for 10, 15, 20 years.
My mom,
And
I found out she had been taking it for 10 years plus 5 milligrams of cortisone a day. And I was like, oh my God.
look, here's the clinical data on that. People who have been on these drugs for at least 5 years, 3 to 5 years, have a 40% higher incidence of heart attack, stroke, and Alzheimer's. These are
Wow,
deadly
okay.
drugs. They should be taken off the market. So those are the two. Then the other thing, when we start to look at the enterosalivary pathway, it's things like fluoride in your toothpaste,
Mm.
fluoride in your drinking water. use of antiseptic mouthwash to completely sterilize the oral cavity.
So
Uh,
that's why I saw that you have in, because, by the way, for those who don't know, Dr. Nathan Bryan has also a company called N101, which has nitric oxide lozenges. We can talk about it, but also a toothpaste. And I was wondering
yeah.
why, what's the connection? Because yours doesn't have fluoride, correct?
Yeah, look, I've known about the dangers of fluoride for the past 25 or 30 years, and so I've always used a non-fluoride toothpaste. But the problem is when we started doing the research on these bacteria, these oral bacteria, through tongue scrapings and trying to figure out which ones are relevant, what environment do they like, what leads to a loss of their populations. And then there were things in there that were destroying my own microbiome, compromising my own nitric oxide production. So as we advanced the research and created an environment where we could repopulate these bacteria, I go, well, then if there's not a solution available, then I have to create one. And so I created a nitric oxide microbiome friendly toothpaste that restores the oral flora, improves nitric oxide production. And we're finding people with what's called resistant hypertension. We put them on our toothpaste, we target the oral microbiome, we improve their nitric oxide production, their blood pressure comes down. I mean, it's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. And now we're
Have you
developing.
seen people? So have you seen people who could get off their blood pressure treatment
Absolutely. All
just
day, every day.
just by removing the toothpaste? I mean, changing the toothpaste
Well, look,
and the mouthwash?
there's a lot of things that contribute to high blood pressure. But what we're finding is that, there's what's called resistant hypertension. And what that means is 50% of the people that go to their doctor and have high blood pressure, they're put on prescription medication and they don't respond with better blood pressure. And these are the things like ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, calcium channel blockers, and sometimes diuretic or beta blockers. But yet people don't respond with better blood pressure. And what we're finding is that their hypertension is due to nitric oxide deficiency. So then you have to ask them, what are you doing that's leading to nitric oxide deficiency? And so 2 out of 3 Americans use mouthwash, killing the oral microbiome, decreasing nitric oxide production. 95 out of 100 Americans are using fluoride toothpaste. 73% of the municipalities in the US have fluoride in their drinking water. So they're sterilizing their skin when they shower, they're sterilizing their gut when they drink water, when they cook food in the water, and it's making people sick. And so now we have to eliminate it. I think we're on the right path. There's a lot of efforts now to get fluoride out of the drinking water. But get fluoride, stop using fluoride toothpaste. It's a poison. In fact, I encourage people, if you're listening to this and you're using a Crest or Colgate or fluoride toothpaste, read the
Trash
back
it.
of the label. It says,
Okay.
if you swallow this, call poison control. But fluoride is a very small molecule, has a molecular weight of 27, I believe. You don't have to swallow this. It's absorbed immediately through the mucous membranes. So every time that you use a fluoride toothpaste, you should call poison control because you are
We
being
should do
poisoned.
that. A quick question.
Follow the
So,
instructions.
would you say that that's a personal question? You mentioned that by using fluoride toothpaste or mouthwash, which I don't use any of these two because I use your toothpaste and I
Yeah.
never used any mouthwash. I don't think I need it. If my teeth are clean and everything, why would I kill the rest of the bacteria? But the water now, I'm filtering it completely. I'm using this good for good technique components and stuff, so my water is completely perfectly clean, no fluoride
Yep.
left. But for 30 years, 40 years, I was, intoxicated or with water with fluoride. And I've always had SIBO and other gut unexplainable, unexplained conditions. And
Yeah.
I've just connected a lot of the dots right now. I removed the mycotoxins from my body. I removed salmonella without using antibiotics. And now I have clean water. Plus, I did a total plasma exchange. All of that combined, plus I take the nitric oxide. I have almost no gut issues anymore to a point where I can even eat foods which have made me sick my entire life.
That's right.
So when I hear you, what you're saying is essentially a lot of kids and adults out there have issues that we use very strong drugs to cure from. We're just removing fluoride.
Well, they don't cure. Drugs don't cure anything.
No, I mean, stabilize, stabilize a condition. I just wrote a piece on ValBiohacker last week on how much more money we make when we don't cure a disease, when we just maintain people with it, but in a better way, but not cured. So I would say, not cured, but you see what I mean.
Yeah.
do you think the vast majority of kids and adults who have gut issues, from IBD to IBS, SIBO, you name it, could be potentially cured now if they were to stop using fluoride in their water, toothpaste, and mouthwash?
Well, I think theoretically, yes, because anything that leads to dysbiosis causes chronic disease. Every age-related chronic disease known to man has an associated dysbiosis. And so, nobody in their right mind today would take an antibiotic every day for the rest of their life. And no physician would recommend that because we know that it's causing collateral damage, causing gut dysbiosis, causing leaky gut, autoimmune, neurological disorders, psychological disorders, and causing systemic disease. So then why are we sterilizing the mouth every day with fluoride toothpaste when we go to the dentist and the dentist are putting fluoride rinses? And 73% of the US has fluoride in their drinking water. And
Just
it's in
so
the
for
drink.
just a quick question for
Yeah.
people who can't, like me, have this entire new filtration system installed in their house. Do you know of an easy way to get rid of nitrate, no, of fluoride in the water?
Now, look, fluoride is a very small molecule, and it takes a very special filtration system to remove fluoride from it. But no, it's a problem. That's why it has to come from the top, and we have to change public policy. Just last year in 2024, well over a year ago, the National Toxicology Program published a very important toxicology study on fluoride. And what they reported is there's zero benefit. People get no benefit from fluoride exposure. And what's the risk? Well, it's a neurotoxin. It shuts down your thyroid function. It's an antiseptic. It kills the bacteria in your body, on your body, throughout your entire gastrointestinal system. And it lowers IQ by as much as 7 points in kids.
That's why I'm way smarter right now.
That's right. I mean, think about this. If something provides zero benefit and all it does is give you risk of,
Why would you use it?
hypothyroidism, heart attack, stroke, systemic disease, then you don't expose the human population to it. And that now think we have an administration that understands the science and getting rid of this. But you have to talk to your municipalities, create a voice to change it.
So if I stop being exposed to fluoride, how long does it take for my body and for my natural nitric oxide production levels to come back to where they should be?
Well, it depends upon the depth of toxicity. I mean, fluoride is typically stored in teeth and bones, and so you just got to continuously, it takes time. But eventually you can completely detoxify. But again, if you're not removing yourself from the source of exposure,
Yeah.
continually exposing yourself to it, and you're chasing your tail.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's a lot to take in. I mean, it's so simple in a way when you see how we are impacting the way we produce nitric oxide. And sometimes we can't control the environment we live in. Like if you live in a place where you can't, because you're renting, you can't change the source of water. When you're showering, your skin being the largest organ on your body gets bombarded with fluoride pretty much. If you go,
Yeah.
oh my God, to a jacuzzi at the gym,
Now you're
chlorine,
getting chlorine, chloramines, it's awful.
your pores are open, and you people tell me, oh, I'm detoxing. I'm like, I don't think you're detoxing if you sweat in a jacuzzi that's full of chlorine and
That's right.
fluoride. Or same thing for the steam room. The steam is made from usually water heavy in chlorine and fluoride, right?
That's exactly right.
So you are not detoxing, you are retoxing.
No, that's right.
Eating
No,
it
and
more.
that's a huge problem. I mean, people try to do the right thing. I think most people have good intentions, but what they don't know can hurt them. And I think that's why these conversations are so important because the science is very clear and the science is there. Now we have to, translate that science into better public policy, into better clinical medicine, and so we can make people better. Because today Americans are the sickest people on the earth. We make up 4% of the global population, but we're responsible for 74%
Yeah.
of profits to big pharmaceutical companies because we're over medicated. And we're over medicated because we don't get to the root cause of why people are sick. And as you
And
mentioned, there is no money in cures. And if we can just eliminate from the body toxins and then give the body what's missing and missing nutrients and vitamins and minerals, the body heals itself. And that should be the goal of medicine. But unfortunately, that would destroy a multi-trillion dollar global economy.
it's very interesting because this discussion is around detoxification, which, by the way, sometimes we get toxic because of what we do to treat ourselves. And as you know, I travel constantly around the world. Next month I'll be in Papua, but I've been to Nepal a lot of the times, several times to climb mountains. And over there, I got Giardia, Salmonella, Morganella, you name it. These bacteria or parasites are happy in my gut. And a few months ago, my doctor looks at the results and is like, oh my God, Salmonella, we're going to have to nuke it. His words, not mine. And I said, how do you nuke Salmonella? And he said, well, we take a very strong antibiotic treatment. We nuke everything out, and then it takes 6 months to potentially rebuild the microbiome. That
Yeah,
sounded
no,
so
thank you.
scary to me. I did some research, and I found out, and not laugh, but oregano oil has the same effect as amoxicillin on salmonella. And I'm like, okay, let's try it. I started in October. 4 weeks of oregano oil killed salmonella. I had zero non-detectable levels after 4 weeks. And I'm like, hold on a minute. If I could do that, instead of giving antibiotics to people for that, why don't they give simple oregano oil products that won't lead you to be so, intoxicated by this that you need to go through harsh recolonization of your gut, which I'm pretty sure does impact your nitric oxide production as well.
Absolutely. Now, look, there are natural treatments out there for pretty much everything. I mean, but again, it's not, it's a natural solution, and it's not, what's called the standard of care, and it's not a prescription doctors can write. So it's go against the payer model and the for-profit business of medicine. But I think it goes back to the very simple fundamentals of why people get sick. Their body's missing something that it needs, or it's exposed to something that it doesn't need. And if you address those two principles, you don't get sick. I don't get sick. I haven't lost a day of work due to illness in probably more than 20, 25 years. Now, I get the occasional kind of, runny nose, allergy or something
But you
from
fight it
exposure.
off.
But look, my body talks to me all the time. When I feel my body's getting run down because I'm traveling too much, not getting enough sleep, that's when I start to become susceptible. But I
Mhm.
take corrective actions. I'll do IV therapy. I'll sit in an infrared sauna. I'll do hyperbaric oxygen. I do IV ozone to support my body, to fortify my body, and then, it creates an environment where infections can't survive and thrive.
And so, well, we do the same thing, by the way. When I get attacked by one of the millions of germs attacking me every day, and I know I'm not going to resist as well as usually, I go into my a hyperbaric chamber, the red light therapy, and then the infrared everything, and also nitric oxide, which, by the way, I take nitric oxide before my hyperbaric chamber treatments and also infrared. Is that something that helps detoxify better or not?
Absolutely. And I do the same thing. The mechanisms of action, and going back to your scuba the comment, it's the high pressure that's increasing the amount of dissolved oxygen in the plasma. And then it's improving tissue oxygenation, improving nitric oxide production, and then it mobilizes stem cells. That's why hyperbaric chambers work and how it leads to enhanced wound healing. But yeah, that's similar with red light therapy. There's certain wavelengths of light, and if we look at the kind of the full spectrum infrared, that frequency and that wavelength of light and energy can release nitric oxide bound to metals. But if you're nitric oxide deficient, there's no nitric oxide bound to metals, less nitric oxide to be released by light. So when I get into my infrared sauna, I take the lozenge, and now I'm improving the microcirculation. I'm dilating blood vessels. I'm mobilizing toxins. I'm excreting more toxins. And the infrared light therapy is actually activating more nitric oxide release. So it's potentiating the effects of the nitric oxide from the lozenge.
Wow. Okay. And no, guys, for those of you watching, whether you're live or after, I'll give you a cool code at the end if you're interested in getting some nitric oxide from N101. But you have to stay until the end. Quick question. How do we produce nitric oxide? I've always thought we were producing nitric oxide or making nitric oxide through two main pathways. One is what I've seen was called the nitric oxide synthase pathway,
Right?
which apparently, if I remember correctly, uses a specific amino acid. I think it's L-arginine or arginine.
That's right.
Yeah, that, oh gosh, I remember well. That helps produce nitric oxide, right? And the second pathway was the nitrate, we talked about it, nitrate, NO pathway. And that's when, remember talking to you and you said, yo, you can have your Corsican ham full of nitrates. It's okay. I'm like, yeah, I love it. And apparently you said to me that this particular pathway number two becomes impaired when we age. if I remember correctly. So
Well,
apart
the
from,
enzyme, yeah, the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels, and even in the upper airway epithelium, that enzyme typically, because of aging and age-related factors, becomes less efficient at producing nitric oxide from arginine. So that's what
okay.
we see, this age-related decline in nitric oxide production. And now we're starting to see age-related declines, age-related changes in the oral microbiome. So we have to be able to
Okay.
account for both of these. These are completely independent, redundant systems. And what we're finding is that one can compensate for the other. But if you have oral dysbiosis and you have endothelial dysfunction, then your body's completely devoid of any nitric oxide production. And that's the people who on a rapid onset of and progression of chronic disease.
So if I were to work on increasing my natural production of nitric oxide, uh, how can I increase it? Do I need to eat nitrate-rich vegetables, for instance, or specific compounds containing amino acids like L-arginine? What would your first recommendation be?
Well, again, it goes back to stop doing the things that are disrupting its production. So
Okay.
stop eating high carbohydrate, anything a high glycemic index. Get rid of fluoride. Stop using mouthwash and get off antacids. So now you've released the brakes on the body's ability to naturally produce nitric oxide. But there are things that can activate and stimulate it. Moderate physical exercise, just 20 to 30 minutes of moderate physical exercise, or even 6 to 8 minutes of high intensity interval training can activate and stimulate nitric oxide production. Nasal breathing, deep breathing through the upper airway, the sinuses can activate nitric oxide production. Again, it's that enzyme that converts arginine to nitric oxide and gets citrulline as a byproduct.
When
And
you
then
say
20
nasal breathing, are you talking about mouth taping at night, for instance, or just
mouth
during the day as
taping at
well?
night. Yeah, I mean, I encourage people to go to an airway specialist and make sure you've got an open airway before you start taping your mouth closed. Because if you've got some obstruction or some anatomical obstruction in your upper sinuses and you're unable to move air through the nasal sinuses, then it's probably a bad idea to tape your mouth. But once you fix your airway, the mouth is not an instrument for breathing. It's not part of our respiratory cycle or respiratory
Mm.
system. It's part of our digestive system. So the mouth is an instrument for eating and digestion. The nose is an instrument for breathing. And so we must do nasal breathing. And too many people mouth breathe, and it's bypassing this nitric oxide production. And then it's fully oxygenating the oral cavity, completely changing the microbiome and the ecology of the bacteria. It's leading to low salivary pH, and you start to get halitosis, bad breath, dry mouth, and it completely destroys the oral microbiome and completely shuts
Well,
down
if we
nitric oxide.
summarize this terrible thing, you're going to have someone who stinks, who cannot get it up, who
But
ages
think about
fast.
this. Think about how simple a fix this could be.
No,
Because
I
if
know.
you're mouth breathing, you have oral dysbiosis, you decrease nitric oxide production, you have bad breath. So what do you want to do? You want to get up, brush your teeth. Most of these people are using
And
mouthwash,
mouthwash.
further
Yeah.
killing nitric oxide production, shuts down systemic nitric oxide production. So now they develop erectile dysfunction, and maybe it's all traced back to them mouth breathing because they're not fully oxygenating at night. They develop sleep apnea. They're killing the nitric oxide producing bacteria. And so all of their symptoms manifest from a nitric oxide production that could be due to mouth breathing. I mean, it all goes back and it makes perfect sense to me. And I think I have a special set of skills with a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and a PhD in molecular and cellular physiology from medical school. So I understand this. But most people don't. And even doctors and physicians, when patients get sick to go to them, they don't understand this. Because the only thing they understand is once we make a diagnosis, have to write a prescription that fits that diagnosis. And that's not making anybody better.
That's true. Okay, well, I could not agree more. I'm not a PhD, but I agree for everything else. So we talked about eating better, reducing carbs, mouthwash, fluorides, everything, exercise as well. Uh,
And sunlight's important, or
Sunlight, that was my
infrared
next
light in the
question.
winter. Yeah,
Yeah. Sunlight or natural daylight for sure.
for sure. I like the first sunlight in the morning. Typically, that's how I start my day. I get up before the sun comes up and I work out. I do my infrared sauna, I do the cold plunge, I do light therapy, and then by that time the sun's coming up and I just sit up and I watch the sun come up. It completely resets my circadian rhythm. But watching the sun come up, I mean,
It's
you basically
magic.
bask in God's glory and you see just the miracles of the world we live in.
And I usually tell people do not wear sunglasses unless you're
No, that's
doing
right.
some strenuous physical activity in the crazy sun, like on a boat or whatever. But in your day-to-day activity, do not, even worse, don't start your day at 8 a.m. with your sunglasses because your
Sunglasses.
body gets the wrong message, right?
Absolutely. Now
And
that
that
sunlight
impacts
is very
your
important.
and that impacts your NO production right from the start of the day.
No, absolutely. There's certain wavelengths of light that release nitric oxide. So if you look at the ultraviolet spectrum, that frequency and that energy can release nitric oxide bound to cysteine thiols on proteins and release nitric oxide. If you look at the kind of the infrared, the other kind of end of the visible light spectrum, that energy will release nitric oxide bound to metals. So we're getting this both kind of extreme from the visible spectrum and even, infrared to where it's activating nitric oxide release. But we have to have enough of these nitric oxide photolabile stores to be released by sunlight. So starting out with a nitric oxide lozenge in the morning or a beet powder before, my workout, as soon as I go out work outside, now the sunlight is activating even more nitric oxide release, improving circulation, improving blood pressure, and improving, human physiology.
And so we talked about sunlight, we talked about oral health and everything. How about we talked about heat exposure as well? How about cold? You mentioned cold plunges. As a Personally, I used to do crazy cold plunges at 40 degrees, which is about like 4 degrees Celsius.
Mm.
I realized my cortisols were high. So I found a middle ground at about 50, 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which is still cold, but it's not ultra cold. Do I still get enough NO release by not going super cold?
Well, I'm not sure there's any data on the cold plunge producing nitric oxide. In fact, it may be just the opposite because it's leading to peripheral vascular constriction, right? Because when we're exposed to cold, we shut down blood supply to the extremities to maintain core body temperature. But I like the contrast therapy, and I don't do the cold plunge every day. I typically do sauna every day.
Yeah.
But cold plunge, I may do 2, 3 times a week. I let my body gauge if it's something that I feel like I should do, or if I'm dreading it, or I always dread it. But if it feel like my body's not ready for it,
Yeah.
then I
I
don't do
don't
it.
dread the infrared sauna, but I dread the cold plunge for
The
sure.
cold plunge, I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it doesn't get any easier. But yeah, look, I started at 40 degrees, and I'll try to get 2.5 to 3 minutes in there. Now usually between 40 and 45 degrees, and I can get 3 minutes. But anything to create a shivering or a piloerection. Because what it's doing is when you go from the sauna, so when you're in an infrared sauna, and mine's at 170 degrees for 30 minutes, you're trying to get rid of heat and you're detoxifying. So it's leading to smooth muscle relaxation and vasodilation in the periphery. And then when you go from that immediately to 40-degree water, it leads to rapid vasoconstriction. So I equate this as like working out the muscles of your blood vessels, like resistance training, because you're going from complete vasodilation to immediate vasoconstriction. And what that does long term is it leads to better vascular reactivity. We need our blood vessels to be able to constrict and relax and regulate blood flow. If I'm trying to recall memory of where I left my car keys, I need to dilate those blood vessels to the prefrontal cortex immediately. If I'm about to be intimate and I need to when I be intimate, then I have to dilate the blood vessels of my sex organs immediately. And if we don't have that good vascular reactivity, we develop dementia and mild cognitive impairment. We develop erectile dysfunction. If we can't dilate the blood vessels of the coronary arteries of the heart, we can't maintain adequate blood supply and circulation and oxygen delivery to the heart, and we develop angina, obstructive coronary disease, and cardiovascular disease. So maintaining smooth muscle and vascular reactivity is absolutely essential for human optimization and disease prevention.
Okay. And to continue on this, we talked about modalities, about
Yeah.
food. How about supplements? So I know we have the nitric oxide lozenges from N101. I know you also have some sort of beetroot powder drink. What's the
Yeah.
difference between beetroot powder or beetroot juice that I've seen a lot of people claim is good for nitric oxide production versus lozenges? Is it you should take it together to increase the production of NO, or is it completely different and it's one or the other?
Now, look, nitric oxide is a gas, right? And I figured out how to make a solid dose form of this gas. So the lozenge creates nitric oxide over 5 to 6 minutes as it's dissolving in the mouth. And so it's vasoactive, it dilates the blood vessels. And, again, we know when nitric oxide is produced, where does it go? What does it become? And how does it signal? We completely recapitulate through that lozenge delivery. Unfortunately, about 25 years ago, there were a lot of companies coming out, or probably about 10, 15 years ago now, coming out with beet juice, beetroot powder. There was some data coming out saying that beetroot contains nitrate. Nitrate can be converted to nitric oxide. It can enhance performance. So then you had all these companies flood the market with beetroot products. And again, they don't know what they're doing. They just see beets, nitric oxide. Now you see all these companies out there selling beet products. Every time I turn on the TV, there's somebody selling a beetroot product. And I've tested these products, and there's zero nitric oxide being produced or delivered from these beetroot products because it's not beets. It's not it's what's in the beets. So because there were a lot of these companies out there using this deceptive, fraudulent marketing and claiming it's nitric oxide, I really felt an obligation and a responsibility that if people want buying into beets and want to take beets as a source of nitric oxide, then let me give them a beet that actually produces nitric oxide. So, but we have to understand the science of how we do this. We start with a certain beet and we ferment them. So we pre-convert the nitrate because most people don't have the right bacteria. So they're unable, if they just drink beet juice, they're going to poop it out, they're going to pee it out, and they're going to sweat it out. No nitric oxide whatsoever. So what we do is we use a highly concentrated fermented beet powder. So as soon as you put it in solution, it starts to produce nitric oxide gas. So it's not dependent upon your body's ability to absorb it, convert it,
It's
make
already
nitric.
converted.
We do it for you. If your body can't make nitric oxide, our products do it for you. And so the beads, we add electrolytes in there for cellular hydration. So now you're going to get water and get the fluids inside the cell and lead to better cellular hydration, detoxification. And then we put a patented peak ATP in this product to improve ATP production. Again, if your body can't make ATP because you have mitochondrial dysfunction, then we provide it for you. So the beets I like to take before a workout because it's really an energy, natural energy source, no stimulants, no caffeine. And then I'll take the lozenge, once or twice in the afternoon as needed. But both products produce nitric oxide. It's the only beet product on the market that actually produces nitric oxide. All the other beet products out there, you might as well, we use them as placebos in our clinical trials. The
Okay,
placebos save
that
your
says
money.
something.
The only thing they're doing is turning your urine and your poop red and causing a lot of
Right.
anxiety. But there's no nitric oxide from these.
Um, a quick question. When you travel a lot by plane, which is something I do and that you do as well, and pretty much
Yeah.
everyone I know does, we are bombarded with cosmic rays. And I like to take, of course, high dose of vitamin C, liposomal version, to prevent some of the DNA breakage that could happen. Can NO help with the impact of air travel on our body?
No, absolutely. Once you understand the physical chemistry of nitric oxide, so these things cause oxygen radicals. And these oxygen radicals are stealing electrons from other molecules. And a loss of electron is what we call oxidation or oxidative stress. Nitric oxide, the reason it's antioxidant is because it scavenges these oxygen radicals that are produced, the hydroxyl radical, the superoxide radical, and it neutralizes them. So if we're under a lot of oxidative stress from whatever, from incomplete enzymatic systems and metabolism to exposure to rays up in 30, 35,000 feet, then we have to have adequate nitric oxide to neutralize those oxygen radicals so they don't damage the cells, the cell membranes, and lead to cellular dysfunction. So
So
absolutely, that
vitamin
explains a lot of
C,
the antioxidant effects.
so you say vitamin C plus NO would do the trick?
Absolutely. I've been using that combination for probably 25, 30 years now.
Perfect, cool. Okay, so we're running out of time. Do you have something you'd like to give us as far as like, hey, if you start from scratch, you're just brand new to detoxification and you want to get started with, opening your pathways, producing more NO or nitric oxide to
Yeah.
support your natural ability to detox, what could be 5 things that people could do starting today?
An 18-hour daily fast. We're overfed, we're grazing throughout the day. The data on intermittent fasting and caloric restriction is undeniable. So I've been doing this for probably 4 to 5 years. So I eat my last meal at 6 p.m. and I don't eat again until noon the next day. And some people say it's difficult. It's really not because if you're getting 8, 9 hours of sleep a night, you're going to go to bed, say
Mhm.
4 hours, 3 to 4 hours after your last meal. You're going to wake up and then you're not going to eat for another, 5 or 6 hours. So it's really not that, but that completely changes your metabolic flexibility. and it's going to lead to what's called autophagy and mitophagy and cleaning up the cellular debris. It's going to, lead to better metabolism. And then, eliminate simple carbs and sugar. And you have to move. There is no substitute for exercise. You have to
There's
get
no
up
magic pill.
and move. Yeah. And then the other big deal is sleep. For me, I need probably at least 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep a night, and I'm diligent to make sure that I do that. And you have to plan your day. And I'm waking up every
So
morning at 5:30.
I'm gonna be a bad student tonight. I'm going to a Warriors game. So sometimes I go to a
Oh, yeah.
basketball game. Shoot me. No, one thing that I'm going through right now, I have nocturnal hypoglycemia episode where I go down to 51, and my CGM actually is beeping all over, so it wakes me up. And I'm super hungry to a point where I'm like literally I'm at 51 milligram per liter. I'm really down on sugar. And if I don't eat, and now it happens around 3 a.m. every night. I don't know
Really?
how to fix it. I've tried everything, and now I used to sleep like a baby, and I'm so hungry during the night. The maybe my NO is impacting this. What would you say?
Well, possibly, or it could be that you've just depleted all your glycogen stores because when you start to run out of circulating sugar, your body starts breaking down your glycogen to mobilize glucose from the liver, from the muscle cells, or even from the adipose tissue. So in people who are metabolically active, a lot of times we use those glycogen stores as metabolic reserves. So your reserves could be low. Um,
Shoot, I
but yeah,
need to eat more chocolate, guys. Sorry.
yeah, maybe so.
Well, I'm super happy that you joined us today. You gave me so many new ideas on other subjects for this webinar. Oh my God, the erectile dysfunction, that's going to be one.
That's right.
But also other things. So, do you have anything you want to add, Nathan, to what we just said? Oh, by the way, if you are looking to, of course, you can increase your own NO production, but if you want to support your system, and this is not a sponsored webinar whatsoever. I really love so much what Dr. Nathan Bryan says that I wanted him here. And he's the founder of N101. If you go to n101.com and you find his products to your liking, just use my code. I don't get anything from that, but it's VAL10 and you get, I think, 10% or maybe 200% free. I don't know. You'll see.
No, but
But
it's N101. It's the letter N,
yeah.
number one, letter O,
Oh,
number
like
one,
Orsoni.
.com. Yeah, so it's one nitrogen, one oxygen, N101.com.
N101.com. Don't hesitate to go there. I'm super happy that you joined us today. It's the first episode of the long game. I hope we will grow together. And
Absolutely.
I hope also that what Nathan told you today has shifted how you think about detoxification. It's not about harsh cleanses or forcing your body, but it's about creating the optimal conditions for your natural detoxification systems to work beautifully, right? So,
Absolutely.
Dr. Bryan, thank you so much for bringing such clarity and warmth and simplicity to complex science. I must admit that your ability to make nitric oxide biology accessible is exactly what I wanted you here for this first webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. And guys, stay connected to us through the Zoom link, through my YouTube ValBiohacker. Follow Dr. Nathan Bryan on Instagram and 101 on Instagram as well, because I think we're going to send you some summary of what we said today. So you have even more actionable items after this Zoom. Anything to add?
Absolutely. No, I would just encourage people to read my latest book. It's called The Secret of Nitric Oxide: Bringing the Science to Life. You can find it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever books are sold, or there's a link at nathansbook.com. But it explains the story of nitric oxide and what it is, why you should be concerned with it, but also my personal journey of discoveries and how we've been able to see what everyone else has seen and think what no one else has thought, which eventually led to some innovative product technology that not only consumer products, our lozenge, our bead powder, we make a nitric oxide line of skincare products for beauty. As Val mentioned, we have an oral line of products, the toothpaste, and we're also developing this as drug therapy. We've got drugs working through the FDA for Alzheimer's and heart disease and topical drugs for diabetic ulcers. So, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. So we're excited about the future of medicine. The future of medicine is going to be dependent upon nitric oxide, and I'm proud and honored to lead the way.
Perfect. Thank you. I will put all these links in an article on valbiohacker.com with a link to that video and all of the books and products from Nathan. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.